Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're focusing on an office that is, well, it's absolutely crucial to India's parliamentary structure, but it often finds itself sort of overshadowed by its bigger sibling, the president. We're talking about the vice president of India.
Right.
A unique constitutional functionary who, believe it or not, holds two entirely distinct identities. One as a powerful legislator, and the other as a necessary, temporary head of the executive.
It is structurally one of the most intriguing positions in our entire governance framework.
Really is.
The vice president is primarily defined by, that legislative function of presiding over the Rajya Sabha, the Council of States.
Right.
But possesses an absolutely indispensable sort of secondary role for ensuring the nonstop continuity of the union executive. It's a job description that really manages that delicate balance between the legislative and the executive branches.
And here's the hook question for you, the learner, right up front.
Yep.
This is the detail that often trips up even seasoned aspirants. Did you know that the election process for the vice president deliberately excludes half of the lawmakers who participate in electing the president?
A huge chunk of them.
And not just any half, but the representatives of the states themselves. We're going to be diving deep into the constitutional logic behind this precise distinction, a logic articulated by Dr. B.R. Ambedkar himself.
That's the key.
We're extracting the core constitutional essence that is just vital for a comprehensive understanding and, of course, for success in high-stakes examinations like the UPSC. Okay, let's unpack this constitutional journey. But before we truly immerse ourselves, a huge welcome to the Deep Dive community.
Welcome, everyone.
We want to take just a quick moment to acknowledge that we are able to bring you this rigorous, source-based, in-depth content because of the incredible support of our listeners.
We really are.
And we want to give a massive shout out and really our sincere gratitude to all our existing paid members. Your support allows us to dedicate the necessary time and resources to dissect authoritative texts like Indian polity and synthesize them into these useful deep dives.
Indeed. We really strive to provide analysis that goes beyond just, rote memorization. It's about helping you connect the dots. And that level of synthesis requires dedicated effort and resources.
It absolutely does. So if you are capable and you're finding this deep dive useful, we humbly request you to take a moment right now.
Please do.
Please subscribe to our YouTube channel, like this video, and share your valuable comments below. If you want to support the continued creation of these rigorous, source-based deep dives and help us keep this content free for everyone, please consider joining our paid membership.
We also want to make sure every learner knows how to maximize their study with the accompanying materials.
Yes.
Free notes, including practice previous year questions, the PYQs relevant to today's topic, are readily available on our Telegram channel.
And for those dedicated learners aiming for that competitive edge, the ones who want the targeted analysis to tackle the trickiest mains questions, we offer premium notes.
These are the next level.
These include extra PYQs and comprehensive model mains answers for complex, nuanced questions. And they're all available exclusively on our Discord channel for our Legend YouTube members. That is where the truly targeted, application-based analysis lives. So do join us there to maximize your preparation. Now, let's get to the mission itself. Our source material today is focused primarily on Chapter 19, Vice President, from M. Laxmikanth's 8th edition of Indian Polity.
The Bible.
It really is. The text provides the essential framework, but our mission today goes beyond just summarizing.
Our mission is, well, it's very precisely defined. We're here to extract the constitutional essence of the Vice President's office.
Okay.
We're focusing specifically on the two fundamental functions and critically analyzing the structural differences in the election process and, of course, the removal procedures.
Right.
We are framing this content directly through the lens of crucial questions that often appear in the UPSC examination, linking concepts across the executive and the legislature to build a holistic picture. We're looking for the why, not just the what.
And when you look at the constitutional hiring process for the VP, you realize they're hired for one job, a major one, but they're implicitly ready for another much, much larger one.
It's true.
Let's start with the two primary functions codified in Article 64 and Article 65 of the Constitution. What is the Vice President's primary day-to-day role?
The Vice President's core identity, their normal function, as the source puts it, is overwhelmingly legislative.
Legislative.
Yes. This is function 1, and it comes from Article 64, serving as the ex officio chairman of the Rajya Sabha, the Council of States.
Let's break down that term ex officio. It's key.
It is key. It means they hold the chairmanship automatically by virtue of holding the higher constitutional office of the vice president. You become VP, you are automatically the chairman of the Rajya Sabha. It's not a separate election or appointment.
So, on Monday morning, the VP walks into the upper house and takes on the mantle of its presiding officer. What does that role actually entail, and how does it compare institutionally?
Well, the role of the chairman of the Rajya Sabha is to maintain order, regulate the proceedings, allocate time for discussions, and, certify various procedural matters within the chamber.
So, the umpire of the upper house.
Essentially, yes. And what's fascinating here is the deliberate structural comparison the Constitution draws.
Okay.
Their powers and functions in this capacity are explicitly stated as similar to those of the Speaker of the Lok Sabha.
Why is that institutional similarity so important?
It ensures procedural parity and consistency across both houses of parliament.
Yeah.
I mean, the rules of engagement, the neutrality of the chair, the power to maintain discipline, all of this must be functionally equivalent for both the directly elected Lok Sabha and the federally constituted Rajya Sabha. This borrowed design ensures predictability in parliamentary conduct.
But there's an international parallel here too, isn't there?
There is a very clear one. We see a clear historical precedent and international analogy here. The Indian vice president resembles the American vice president, who similarly acts as the chairman of the Senate, which is the upper house of the U.S. legislature.
I see.
It's an institutional borrowing, but it's been adapted to our specific federal framework.
I find it really interesting that our Constitution opted for the vice president to preside over the upper house, rather than having the Rajya Sabha elect its own presiding officer from among its members, like the Lok Sabha does with the speaker.
That's a great point.
It really emphasizes that this office is designed to sit slightly above the fray of the upper house's internal politics.
Precisely. The chairman, by not being a member of the House from the start, and remember, the VP is not a member of either house,
Crucial point.
is supposed to bring a higher degree of impartiality and constitutional gravitas to the role, free from the daily pressures of party allegiance within the Rajya Sabha itself.
But the constitutional continuity relies on their second temporary function. Let's talk about that executive leap, where the VP shifts from being the highest legislative officer to the highest executive official.
Right. This is function 2. It's the executive role, and it's defined by Article 65, acting as president or discharging the president's functions.
Okay.
And this role is explicitly secondary and contingent, but it is utterly indispensable for the continuity of the state.
And what are the critical circumstances that necessitate the vice president stepping up to the highest executive post? There's a subtle but really important difference in the two scenarios described in the source.
Absolutely. The first scenario is when a permanent vacancy occurs in the office of the president.
Okay, permanent. So this could be due to
Things like resignation, impeachment, death, or otherwise, like if the election is annulled by the Supreme Court. In this scenario, the vice president acts as the president.
And crucially, the Constitution imposes a time limit.
A very strict one. A maximum acting period of 6 months, during which time a new president must be elected and assume office.
That 6-month hard limit is so important. Why is that time limit so strictly defined for a permanent vacancy?
It's fundamentally about democratic legitimacy.
The mandate.
The mandate, exactly. The President of India holds a mandate that reflects the entire federal structure, Parliament and all state assemblies. The VP, elected only by Parliament, lacks that complete federal mandate.
I see.
Therefore, the moment the highest office becomes permanently vacant, that 6-month limit kicks in to ensure that the office of the president, the titular head of the republic, is quickly restored to a full, popularly elected mandate.
It prevents a parliamentary appointee, the VP, from indefinitely holding the top federal executive post.
That's the logic.
That makes perfect constitutional sense. The mandate must be refreshed by the full electoral college. Now let's look at the second scenario, which relates to a temporary incapacity.
Right. The second scenario is when the sitting president is simply unable to discharge their constitutional duties.
For example,
due to absence, illness, or any other temporary cause. For instance, if the president's undergoing major surgery or is abroad on an extended essential state visit.
so there's still the president, just unavailable.
Exactly. In this case, the vice president discharges those functions until the president resumes his or her office.
And here's the key difference. In this scenario, there is no 6-month limit.
Precisely.
Yeah.
Because the vacancy is not permanent, it's just a temporary incapacity. The president still holds the office, and the moment they are fit to resume their duties, they do so.
Okay.
The VP is merely filling in for the duration of that temporary disruption. The constitutional aim is simply to ensure the functions of the de jure executive are never suspended, regardless of whether the interruption is brief or sustained.
So the VP is essentially the constitutional continuity mechanism, a stopgap measure designed to ensure the nominal executive function is never suspended, even for a single day.
They are the shadow executive, as you said, always ready to step into the constitutional shoes of the president.
Now we arrive at what makes the vice presidential election a truly compelling subject for analysis.
Yes.
The unique structure of the Electoral College. This is where we uncover the constitutional priorities that define the office. Why is this body composed so differently from the body that elects the president?
This distinction is, I would say, paramount, particularly for UPSC preparation, because it reveals the core functional prioritization of the office.
It's not just a list to memorize.
No. If you only memorize the list, you miss the crucial logic. The vice president is elected by an electoral college that is fundamentally and critically different from the president's electoral college.
Let's delineate those differences clearly, because comparing these two electoral bodies is a classic examination question. First, just remind us, who elects the president?
Okay, so the presidential electoral college includes 1. Elected members of parliament, so both houses, and 2. Elected members of the state legislative assemblies.
And notice the emphasis there. Only elected representatives participate.
Right. This is to ensure the federal mandate isn't diluted by nominated members.
Now, let's look at the vice presidential college. Who exactly makes that up?
The VP college, which is defined by Article 66, consists solely of members of parliament, both houses. Critically, this includes
Both kinds of members.
both kinds. Number 1, elected members of parliament, and number 2, nominated members of parliament.
That's fascinating. In the presidential election, nominated members are strictly excluded. But for the VP, they're included. And here is the bigger question that connects back to our opening hook. Where are the state assemblies?
They're nowhere to be found. The crucial exclusion, the difference you must engrave into your memory, is that unlike the presidential election, the VP Electoral College does not include the elected or nominated members of the state legislative assemblies. The entire process is confined to the central parliament.
So why? Why are nominated members included for the VP but excluded for the president?
It links directly back to the mandate. The president performs a high federal function, encompassing both the center and the states. Nominated members, being appointed by the executive, might potentially compromise the neutrality of that national mandate.
But for the VP?
But the vice president's primary role is purely parliamentary. It's presiding over the Rajya Sabha. So since the election is fundamentally an internal parliamentary matter concerning the presiding officer of a union house, the distinction between elected and nominated members just isn't considered constitutionally relevant for the VP. It's viewed as a matter for Parliament as a whole.
Okay, let's turn to the constitutional architects themselves for the why regarding the exclusion of states. This is the moment of genuine insight where we use our source material to analyze the constitutional mind of India. What rationale did Dr. B.R. Ambedkar provide for excluding the state legislatures during the Constituent Assembly debates?
Dr. Ambedkar addressed this asymmetry explicitly, and his justification is the definitive constitutional reasoning you need to know.
What did he say?
He observed that the president's power is sweeping. It extends to the administration by the center as well as to the states. The president wields executive power across the union.
Right.
Therefore, participation from state legislatures is necessary to give the president a mandate that reflects the entire federal structure and the interests of the constituent states.
But the vice president is fundamentally different, structurally and functionally.
Exactly. Ambedkar continued, and I'm paraphrasing here, but he stated that the vice president's normal functions are to preside over the Council of States.
That's the day job.
That is the primary day-to-day work. Since the temporary assumption of presidential duties is described as a rare occasion and not their primary role, participation by state legislatures is deemed unnecessary. Superfluous, even.
So why involve state politicians in the selection of a person whose chief duty is confined to the central legislature?
That's the question he answered. The logic is that clean.
This analysis requires us to pause and truly appreciate the constitutional economy at play. The election mechanism is perfectly tailored to reflect the daily function of the office, not the rare temporary contingency.
Right. If the job is primarily legislative presiding over the Rajya Sabha, then the selection should reflect that parliamentary focus.
Moreover, this implicitly reflects the non-federal nature of the vice president's primary duty.
It does. While the Rajya Sabha itself represents the states, the vice president, as chairman, is functioning within the legislative domain of the union government. If we had included state assemblies, the office would carry an unnecessary federal mandate, which could potentially complicate the relationship between the VP and the Rajya Sabha, whose members are themselves representatives of state interests.
I understand the constitutional logic, but here's a thought. Doesn't excluding state assemblies dilute the federal mandate, even for that rare event when the VP becomes acting president, who then wields full federal power?
That is the essential political and legal tension built into the office. And that's a great question for a mains exam.
Yeah.
Ambedkar's assumption was that the acting period would be short. We have that maximum of 6 months for a permanent vacancy. So the constitutional design prioritizes practical administrative efficiency and parliamentary relevance over providing a full federal mandate for a temporary contingent role.
So it's a trade-off.
It is. If the VP were intended to frequently occupy the executive chair, or if the acting period were prolonged, the Constitutional Assembly would likely have included the states. This difference forces us to recognize that the VP is intended to remain primarily a legislative functionary.
We should also connect this to the election technicalities, briefly mentioned in our source. They really highlight the seriousness attached to these high constitutional offices.
Gatekeeping measures.
Exactly.
That's right. The Constitution mandates that high offices demand serious candidacy to protect the dignity of the Republic. Both the President and the VP require a significant formalized number of proposers and seconders for their nomination, along with a security deposit.
It's to show you have real support.
It ensures that candidates have real, documented backing from a substantial segment of the Electoral College.
And I recall the source mentioning the requirements were drastically increased for the president in 1997.
Yes, the requirements were elevated to discourage non-serious candidates. For the president, it's 50 proposers and 50 seconders, along with a 15,000-mile security deposit.
And for the VP?
While the specific numbers for the VP election are slightly lower, it's 20 proposers and 20 seconders, the principle is consistent. The system values solemnity and filters out individuals running just for a giggle. The bar is set high to ensure the process focuses on credible contenders with genuine political backing within the legislative sphere.
And that security deposit, by the way, is forfeited if the candidate fails to secure a minimum number of votes, which further reinforces that seriousness.
It's an administrative mechanism to uphold the dignity of a constitutional election.
Moving on, let's discuss the vice president's term and how they can be removed. The removal procedure itself is a key constitutional insight that ties directly back to their primary role as chairman of the Rajya Sabha. First, the term itself.
The vice president holds office for a term of 5 years from the date they assume office.
Simple enough?
And they're also eligible for re-election indefinitely. The source also highlights that the VP continues to hold office even after their term expires until their successor enters office, a crucial detail to ensure no vacuum is created.
Now for the removal process. This is the core constitutional distinction under Article 67, and it's a frequently tested point in examinations because of the specific majority requirement and the House of Initiation.
It is.
Where must the resolution for removal originate, and what kind of majority is required?
The removal process, again, underscores the VP's accountability to the upper house. The vice president can be removed by a resolution passed by a majority of all the then members of the Rajya Sabha.
Let's stop there and define this crucial term for our learners. We can't just drop constitutional jargon like majority of all the then members. What exactly is an effective majority in this context, and how does it differ from a simple majority?
That is a critical distinction to master. An effective majority means a majority of the total membership of the House, excluding the seats which are vacant. It is often mathematically expressed as greater than 50% of the effective strength of the House.
Okay, so let's use an example. If the Rajya Sabha has a total sanctioned strength of 245 members, but 5 seats are currently vacant, the effective strength is 240. An effective majority would require 121 members to vote in favor.
Precisely. And this is a much higher threshold than a simple majority, which only requires a majority of members who are present and voting.
Why the higher bar?
Requiring an effective majority ensures that the removal of the chairman is a serious decision supported by a substantial portion of the House's entire current strength, not just those who happen to be in attendance on a particular day.
And this leads us to the crucial procedural protection. The resolution must originate only in the upper house.
Correct. The resolution for the removal of the vice president can be introduced only in the Rajya Sabha and not in the Lok Sabha.
And this reinforces.
It reinforces the VP's specific accountability to the upper house over which they preside. It is a procedural protection of the chairman of the Rajya Sabha, ensuring that the House itself controls the removal process of its own presiding officer, protecting the legislative branch from potential executive interference.
Why give the Rajya Sabha the sole power of initiation for removal, even though the VP is elected by both houses of parliament?
It's all about structural insulation. Since the VP's primary job is to maintain order and preside over the Rajya Sabha role that often requires making politically difficult decisions or enforcing rules against the government of the day, the Constitution protects the presiding officer from being constantly threatened by the popular, powerful Lok Sabha. If the Lok Sabha could initiate removal, the VP would be politically vulnerable to the party with the majority in the lower house, potentially compromising their neutrality in the Rajya Sabha.
So this rule ensures the VP's allegiance remains tied to their constitutional role as the custodian of the Council of States.
That's the idea.
So a Rajya Sabha initiates by a high bar, this effective majority, but the Lok Sabha still plays a role in the process.
It does, but it's a secondary role. The Lok Sabha must agree to the resolution, but they do so by a simpler requirement, a simple majority.
So the heavy lifting is done in the Rajya Sabha.
Exactly. The initiation, the high procedural bar, and the heavier majority requirement reside exclusively with the Rajya Sabha. The Lok Sabha's agreement is necessary because the VP is elected by both houses, but their agreement is a check, not an initiation of accountability.
That procedural flow really underlines the VP's core connection to the legislative role. If the Rajya Sabha decides, by effective majority, that its presiding officer must be removed, the Lok Sabha essentially has a non-initiatable veto right, and that veto only requires a simple majority vote of agreement.
It's a very efficient system, tailored for a parliamentary office. It's also worth noting two procedural details. First, a minimum of 14 days' notice must be given before such a resolution is moved in the Rajya Sabha.
In the second.
The Constitution does not specify the grounds for removal.
That's interesting.
It is. Unlike the president, who can only be impeached for a violation of the Constitution, the grounds for removing the VP are left to the political wisdom of the two houses, though historically it would likely relate to constitutional impropriety or failure to perform legislative duties.
Additionally, the vice president can vacate office through other methods.
Of course, they can resign by writing to the president. This resignation becomes effective the moment it is submitted to the president.
And the sources also mention the general principle of vacating office if appointed to another major constitutional post.
Yes, this speaks to the prohibition on holding multiple offices that might conflict or overlap in function. A person cannot hold the office of the vice president and simultaneously hold any office of profit.
The general principle, therefore, is clear. The VP office is a singular constitutional appointment, demanding full-time attention and constitutional loyalty. This entire discussion, the exclusion of state assemblies in the election, the inclusion of nominated members, and the initiation of removal only in the upper house leads us directly to the structural implications for the UPSC learner.
Let's connect the dots.
Let's connect these dots to the wider constitutional architecture of Indian federalism. First, let's revisit the special powers of the body the VP presides over, the Rajya Sabha.
Understanding the significance of the Rajya Sabha is critical, as it is the foundation of the VP's normal power and relevance. While the two houses share nearly co-equal power in ordinary legislation, the Rajya Sabha holds unique, specific authority that reinforces its role as the protector of federal interests.
Okay, what are these unique legislative powers that truly elevate the Rajya Sabha's importance in the federal structure?
The first, and arguably most critical power, is detailed under Article 312, creating All India Services.
Right.
The Rajya Sabha can authorize the Parliament to create one or more new All India Services, which are common to both the center and the states, by a resolution supported by a two-thirds majority of members present and voting.
And why is this power granted exclusively to the Rajya Sabha?
Because the creation of an All India Service, like the IAS or IPS, directly affects the administrative capacity and autonomy of the states. Since the Rajya Sabha is constitutionally designed to represent the interests of the states, its members are elected by state legislative assemblies, it acts as the only appropriate gatekeeper for such major administrative changes.
So it's protecting the states.
Exactly. The source notes that this power is granted specifically to protect the interests of states in the federal system. It is a powerful check against central overreach, ensuring the administrative spine that connects the union and the states has prior qualified approval from the chamber representing the states.
That makes the chairman of the Rajya Sabha the vice president, the procedural custodian of the chamber that holds a fundamental veto over administrative federal restructuring.
Absolutely. The second major special power relates to the approval of emergency proclamations.
Articles 302, 356, and 360.
Yes. This ensures continuous legislative oversight during times of national crisis.
How does the Rajya Sabha ensure continuity during an emergency?
Well, if the Lok Sabha is dissolved or its dissolution takes place during the approval period of a proclamation of national, president's, or financial emergency,
Which can happen.
the proclamation can remain effective if it's approved by the Rajya Sabha alone. Once the new Lok Sabha is constituted, it has a fixed period, usually 30 days, to approve the proclamation itself.
That is immense power in the hands of the upper house. It ensures that the emergency powers of the union executive, which kind of convert the federal structure into a unitary one during a crisis, don't lapse purely because the lower house is out of session or dissolved.
And what's fascinating here is that the Rajya Sabha, which never dissolves, it is a continuing chamber, with members retiring periodically, takes over the primary legislative oversight function during these critical times of dissolution or suspension of the Lok Sabha.
It's the backstop.
It's the ultimate legislative backstop. This ensures continuous democratic oversight during periods of potential executive dominance, safeguarding the spirit of parliamentary accountability even when the principal popular chamber is absent.
Now, let's link the vice president's role back to the larger framework of Indian governance, the concept of the parliamentary executive. Our sources heavily stress the difference between India's system and others.
Right. The vice president's function highlights the foundational difference between the Indian republican system, where the head of state is elected, and the British monarchical system, where the head of state holds a hereditary position.
A key distinction.
India, unlike the UK, has an elected head of state, which fundamentally defines our republican character.
And within that republican parliamentary structure, we have the classic distinction between the nominal executive and the real executive.
The de jure versus de facto.
A crucial concept for the UPSC learner.
Precisely. The president is the nominal executive, the de jure executive. This means the legal or titular executive. All executive actions are formally taken in their name. The Prime Minister, aided by the Council of Ministers, is the real executive, the de facto executive.
The actual seat of power.
The actual seat of power and decision-making. The VP, when acting as president, temporarily fills that de jure role.
And why is that important for the VP?
It ensures constitutional stability. When the president is absent or the office is permanently vacant, the VP guarantees that the nominal head of state position is always occupied. This maintains constitutional continuity without disturbing the actual power center, which remains the de facto prime minister and the Council of Ministers.
So the VP steps into the constitutional shell of the president, but doesn't change the parliamentary dynamic.
That's a perfect way to put it.
For the UPSC learner, the synthesis of this information into actionable knowledge is key. Let's focus on the comparisons and PYQ integration points drawn from the source materials. The primary takeaway must be the comparative study.
Absolutely. Focus intensely on comparing the grounds, the procedures, and the electoral colleges for removal and election of the president versus the vice president. Specifically, spend time mastering Ambedkar's reasoning for why state assemblies are excluded for the VP. That is the functional core of the office.
We must also bring in those PYQ relevant concepts mentioned in the surrounding sources that connect to the VP's overall constitutional orbit, particularly in the context of federal checks and administrative stability. Our sources briefly mention the non-implementation of the fifth schedule.
Right. The source mentions analyzing the impact of non-implementation of the provisions of the fifth schedule on the growth of left-wing extremism.
Okay, what's the connector?
The fifth schedule relates to the administration and control of scheduled areas and scheduled tribes, which are geographically sensitive and administratively complex zones. This matters because these regions are prone to instability when welfare and governance mechanisms fail.
So it's an executive responsibility.
It is. The stability provided by the union executive, which the VP stands ready to lead temporarily, is constantly tested in these complex administrative zones, making the role of the executive critical to federal stability and law and order.
It shows that even a seemingly niche constitutional provision like the Fifth Schedule relates back to the massive responsibility of the union executive, whose continuity is guaranteed by the VP.
And finally, let's look at the check on both the executive and the legislature. The judiciary's role in protecting rights against potential overreach. The source mentions the role of the Supreme Court as the sentinel on the qui-vive.
I love that phrase, sentinel on the qui-vive. It's so evocative. What does it mean for the VP and the parliament he presides over?
Sentinel on the qui-vive means the guard on the alert. This phrase is applied to the Supreme Court as the ultimate defender and guarantor of fundamental rights under Article 32.
Okay.
This concept contrasts sharply with the limited, restricted power of Parliament, over which the VP presides, because of the basic structure doctrine established by the Kesavananda Bharati case.
So while the VP presides over the upper house, which has limited amending power based on the basic structure doctrine,
the Supreme Court is the body that watches over both the legislature and the executive to ensure the constitutional framework is not violated.
it connects the three pillars of democracy.
It does.
Mm-hmm.
The VP, as a legislative official and potential executive head, operates within a system where judicial review exercised by the courts as the sentinel provides a non-negotiable check on power, specifically protecting rights. It highlights that the entire structure, including the specific roles of the president and VP, must conform to this basic structure principle, guaranteeing the rights of the citizens are paramount.
That rigorous separation and linkage constantly under the watch of the judiciary is what makes the Indian constitutional system so robust and so challenging to master for the competitive exams.
So to synthesize this deep dive for you, the learner, the vice president, is fundamentally the custodian of the Council of States, the Rajya Sabha.
The legislative role first.
This primary legislative function dictates the unique composition of their electoral body, excluding the state assemblies, and the initiation-only procedure for their removal, which requires an effective majority.
Right. Simultaneously, they hold an indispensable, albeit temporary, role in the continuity of the union executive, ensuring stability in the absence or incapacity of the president.
And the election reflects that.
The unique election procedure, justified by Dr. Ambedkar, directly reflects this constitutional prioritization of the legislative role over the rare executive contingency.
It's all about constitutional design precisely matching functional requirement, creating an office that is both powerful and reserved. And that leads us to our final provocative thought for you to chew on.
Yeah.
Since the vice president's office is constitutionally protected by a specific removal process originating only in the upper house, does this concentration of power better insulate the federal element, that is, the Rajya Sabha and its presiding officer, from constant central political pressures originating in the Lok Sabha? Or does it risk creating an imbalance in the parliamentary check and balance system by making the presiding officer too insulated from the popular will represented by the lower house? Think about that political dynamic, especially regarding the requirement for only a simple majority agreement from the Lok Sabha as you study the detailed procedures.
This deep dive has given you the necessary shortcuts, the definitions, and the essential constitutional nuances for comprehensive preparation in this area, linking the constitutional text to real political dynamics.
We hope these source-based insights serve you well in your preparation.
Before we wrap up, please remember our action requests. If you found this deep dive useful, please like this video, share your valuable comment below, and definitely subscribe.
And to keep these high-value deep dives coming, and to gain access to our premium notes, including model answers and extra PYQs for mains questions, please consider supporting us by joining our membership on YouTube and connecting with us on Discord.
Thank you for making this deep dive possible. We'll see you on the next one.